Hey pretty people, I'm Gypsy, this is Broken Dolly TV. Today we're going to talk about some of the biggest mistakes that new doll collectors make, especially us Barbie doll collectors, and how to avoid them. There are so many things about doll collecting that I wish that I had known when I started this journey about a decade ago. So I decided to pay it forward by helping my fellow collectors who are new to this by giving you guys some tips on things that you can be aware of as you're embarking on this journey, because collecting really is a lifestyle and there's a lot to it than you might realize when you first jump into this. So if you are a seasoned collector and you're watching this video, if any of the stuff that I'm talking about resonates with you or sparks a reminder to you of other things that you wish that somebody had warned you about that you struggled with, please feel free to leave that in the comments so that other collectors who are watching this video can learn what to avoid and what to expect. So whether you're collecting for nostalgia, for artistry, or customization, if you avoid these pitfalls, it's going to save you some time, money, and frustration. Mistake number 1, buying everything at once. The excitement of collecting can lead to impulse buying, which then leads to a lot of regret later on. So some ways to avoid doing this is to actually start your collection off with a set theme. For me, now that I've had some time really figuring out what I like and what I don't like, I have a few different themes that I have going. One is absolutely face sculpts. I make my first decision whether or not to add a doll to my collection based on the face sculpt. If it's a sculpt that I already have too many of, or it's a very common head sculpt like Millie, then I try to stay away from those dolls because I don't need 12 versions of the exact same doll but with different hair colors and outfits, if you get what I'm saying. Another thing that I pay attention to is the skin tones of the dolls. I like to have a lot of different complexions in my collection because I like to represent diversity and how people in the real world look. And when I say skin tones, I don't just mean complexions, but I also mean the racial diversity, the look of the doll. If I have just too many dolls that look the same, it gets boring for me. So I try to make it as varied as possible. So I don't just want a doll because it's black. I want the doll because the hair texture is a specific type of texture that represents a certain kind of black person. If I have 2 black dolls, they might not look at all alike in varying specific features because they represent different kinds of black people, if that makes sense. So I do the same thing with the body types. I like to have variations in body types. I just like to have a lot of variety, but that's just my personal thing. You might want to focus on collecting a line of vintage dolls or dolls based on their fashions. You might want to base your collection on color schemes. So maybe you really love pastels and you want to dress your dolls in pastel colors or only buy dolls that come in pastel colors. Maybe you like lots of prints. Maybe you like neutrals. This might give you an idea of how you might want to display your dolls if you follow a theme that will really help you to narrow things down. I would say setting a budget also helps to prioritize dolls. But when I say budget, I don't mean buy the cheapest, most affordable doll necessarily. I think it's okay to skip budget dolls and playline dolls and cheap dolls if you prefer to save your money to buy something you truly love, even if that doll is a little bit more expensive. Because at the end of the day, if you're not really feeling those cheaper dolls, then they're just gonna end up taking up lots of precious space, which you will soon run out of if you're not paying attention to these things. And then you're gonna have to pick and choose which dolls you want to keep and which dolls you want to rotate through your displays or just downsize altogether because you weren't thinking about these things when you got happy to just buy a bunch of beautiful dolls the moment you saw them. For me, that weakness was the fashionistas line. When I first jumped into collecting heavily, I was very focused on the fashionistas and was just buying every single one that I could get my hands on because they were cheap, they were easy to find, and they came with a lot of cool fashions at the time. So I just racked up on fashionistas. But as time went on, I realized I don't need to do that. Don't worry about that. And another issue that I think some of us have is, so for example, if you're into the Dia de los Muertos dolls, sometimes people will just buy all of them that come out for the sake of having all of them. But at the same time, they're very expensive at retail price. You might not even be feeling the doll like that, but you're just adding it because you want to say, oh, look, I have the whole completion. That's a really a limiting way to think about collecting your dolls, and you don't have to be pressured to do that to yourself because nobody cares. To be honest, nobody cares. You're not gonna gain more respect from the doll community because you have a complete set of anything. And at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter. It really doesn't matter if everyone else around you is admiring your collection. It's for you personally to enjoy. So that should not be a mentality that you use to factor in whether you need to have a doll or not. And going along with this theme about buying everything you see all at one time, please don't let people like me, who are considered doll community influencers that post about dolls and create content regarding dolls, to pressure you guys into buying certain dolls if you're not 100% excited about that doll. You know, you kind of know like 90% before you see a review or research a doll if you're really into that doll or not, and you just need a little bit more information or validation to justify buying that doll. Stick with your gut. Don't come to a review about a doll at like 50% and then be like, well, because I saw this review, because these people have the doll, because this person's doll looks so good, I'm just gonna buy one too. Don't do that to yourself because you will probably end up regretting it later. And trust me, I'm saying this from experience. I've done this multiple times and ended up having to get rid of that doll, resell the doll, take her apart and Frankenstein her into something else, or just plain stuff her in a box and never look at her again because she just bores me. So take that how you will. Mistake number 2 is not having a collection theme. So I kind of touched on this earlier when I was talking about my own collection theme. And of course, your theme can change. So don't feel like you're locked in, because sometimes we go through phases where we're like obsessed with vintage dolls for a little while, or nostalgic dolls from our childhood that we didn't get to have, or maybe had and then lost. But then after a while, like that will just kind of get boring. So we'll switch to something else. That's okay. The key point here is that when you don't have a focus for your collection can become extremely overwhelming, very disorganized. And the problem with doll collecting is you're literally collecting, like you keep adding and adding and adding more, and you're not removing from your collection as much as you're adding to it. So over time, it's very easy for your collection to just become gigantic. And if you don't have infinite amounts of space to display your dolls, store your dolls, that could become a source of your mental health declining. And at the end of the day, this is supposed to be a hobby. It's not supposed to cause you stress. If you're getting stressed out by your doll collection, it's time to evaluate what is going on here, okay? So maybe you want to base your collection on like an era of dolls, the 50s to 70s, 80s to 90s nostalgia. Maybe you like the fashion fever era, or even the modern dolls that we see now. Maybe you're really into like pop culture or celebrity dolls. For example, my Aaliyah back here, or the Barbie movie might have gotten you into collecting. There's the Twilight dolls, X-Files dolls, all kinds of different characters and celebrities like Vera Wang that you might want to add to your collection. And then we have those dolls that are based on fashion and design. There's so many different ones to choose from with this. So if you're really into high fashion, like for example, my Style by Me Riley doll back here, the Moschino Barbies, then those might be something you want to get into. Yes, they're a little bit pricier, not gonna lie. But if it's within keeping a theme, then it might be worth it to you to save up and spend the money on dolls that you're really gonna be proud of to display and handle, rather than whatever you can get your hands on right now. And for some people, they really love rehabbing dolls. So they make it a point to only buy dolls secondhand or thrifted, and then they customize the doll or do whatever they need to do to restore the doll. And there's a lot of fun in that and a lot of pride that goes into displaying these dolls that you had a hands-on experience bringing to life. It could make the dolls a lot more meaningful for that collector. You might also want to focus on body types and articulation. There's all kinds of different articulation and body types now. We have at least 5 different body types, which include the original, petite, athletic, curvy, and tall bodies. And those come in varying degrees of articulation. You might have made to move articulation, model muse articulation, standard default articulation, and you can always make hybrids out of your dolls. So if you're interested in having body type variants, then that might be a focus that you want to have in your theme. And any combination of these things go as well. So when you pick a theme to base your doll collection around, it will make the management of your dolls a lot easier for you. And ultimately, that may help you to enjoy your collection a lot better. Mistake number 3, not doing enough research before purchasing a doll. Some dolls are overpriced simply due to hype, and then there's other dolls that might drop in original value. For example, Aliyah back here, she is at retail price only $55. I said only, like that's not a lot, but I'm saying she's $55. But right now, if you go to eBay, there's people selling her for $300, $150. Just insert a random number wherever you want to put it. That doesn't mean that this doll is worth that much, but there's a lot of hype over this doll right now because she's so hard to find, and she literally just got released in January. So if you're not doing your research, you could get scammed into buying a doll for way more than what she's actually worth, where you could do some research and figure out where you can get the doll a little bit cheaper, or wait a little longer for the prices to come down, because they sometimes do. For example, this doll and this boy doll over here in the package, Dia de Muertos dolls, the original price for these guys are about $75, but I only paid like $40 for each of these dolls because I bought them on sale. So if you're interested in dolls like this that are very, very high price originally, if you wait long enough, I mean, these two are the 2024 versions, so they're not that old, but they're like the cheapest of the Dia de Muertos dolls that are available right now on sale. If you're watching this close to the time that I uploaded the video and you're interested in dolls like this, I would say go and look around. I found mine on Amazon for very, very cheap prices, and they sent them to me the same day I ordered them with free shipping. So if you're interested in these dolls, I would say go and check that out. Maybe the listings are still active and they are still on sale. But I also saw the other versions of previous years that are, some of them are even prettier than the ones that I got, and they're not at retail price right now. All of them have dropped in price. So I don't know how long the sale is going to be going on for, but if you're interested in something like this, then you might want to check that out. So what I like to do is I like to check prices everywhere that a doll is available. I'll go to Amazon, I'll go to eBay, I'll go to the retailer's actual like website, like Mattel Creations. I'll go to whatever third-party websites I know of that sells a doll, like Walmart or whatever, and then I'll do a search for the same doll and try to compare all the different prices, including the shipping and how long it will take for the doll to get to me. Sometimes when you go to eBay, you can find a doll for a really good price, but it might be missing something, like it doesn't come new in the box, which for me is not a factor because I don't keep my dolls in boxes. They could be missing their original clothes, which again for me is not always a factor because I might want the doll mostly for the head or the body or a combination of both, and I plan to restyle my doll. I usually always take my dolls out of their clothes. It depends on the doll. I might not care. Like for example, back here in that trench coat, you'll see there's Gillian Anderson's face sculpt, Agent Scully. I bought her nude on eBay for a reasonable price. At the time when I bought her, though, she was sold out everywhere. I didn't need her suit. I didn't need the little gadgets that she came with. I didn't need the box. I just wanted her face. I think I even took her head off of her original body and gave her a made to move. For me, that was worth it just to have that face in my collection. You know, you have to use your common sense and decide whether you want to spend, say, $90 on the doll in box, or if you are willing to spend $30 for the doll with no clothes on, right? Also, you want to know the difference between a playline doll, a collector doll, and a limited edition doll. These are not all the same thing. Barbie will market their dolls differently depending on what category they go into. So for example, a playline doll is the most basic doll that's marketed specifically for children. And the reason why I say you should know the difference is because sometimes we judge playline dolls as if they're meant for adults. We'll get irritated about certain things like stiff bodies or crazy looking clothing designs or poor quality hair, and that's not really a fair way to judge that doll because it's not meant for an adult to play with. It is supposed to be for children who are playing very rough with the dolls. We can't always judge those dolls the same way or look at the price points of those dolls as a baseline for all Barbie dolls. If you're looking at a collector doll, for example, the quality of the doll may be slightly different than a playline, so the price might go up. The clothing might be a different quality or style. The hair texture and styling might be a little more intricate. They might use a face sculpt that you don't usually see on a playline doll, so it's not as common. So these things will drive the price of the doll up a little bit. Sometimes we'll look at that doll and say, well, she's got a stiff body and this playline doll has articulation. The playline doll is $15 and this collector doll is $50. I ain't paying that much for that doll. Yeah, well, we're measuring them by different standards, so you kind of have to factor all of those things in. So don't be so quick to judge whether or not the doll is worth the money or not if you don't really understand the difference between a playline and a collector doll. Another thing is a limited edition doll. These dolls are limited in quantities that Mattel produces in the first place. So Black Label is the most basic collector level doll. It means there's no cap on how many dolls they produce. It's absolutely mass produced and pretty much available wherever dolls are available, which Aaliyah back here is supposed to be, but that's not always the case, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, but you might have a limited edition doll that is like a gold label or a silver label, and they might go up in tier, and the higher up they go, the less in quantity they produce and release to the public. Mattel even has one-of-a-kind dolls that they only literally have one of, and they will auction those dolls for a charity, so only one human being in the entire planet has those dolls, and they're like priceless, you feel me? So just understand there's a difference in tiers of Barbies. Even if they have the same face sculpt or similar features, these are things you want to keep in mind as you're choosing which dolls you want to buy. Here's a big mistake, number 4, that a lot of us make. We assume sometimes that all Barbies will increase in value over time, and this is not the case. Not every Barbie is an investment, quite frankly, especially mass-produced dolls that are like Black Label dolls or plain-line dolls. They hardly ever gain much value. Honestly, as collectors, we cannot really predict accurately which dolls are going to turn into instant classics and which ones won't. Like, there might be a doll that you assume is going to be so popular, she's going to fly off the shelves. Then it comes out and like nobody's buying it. Like, go on Mattel Creations website and look at the Ken Kuchar doll. He's immaculate. He is beautiful. He's awesome. But at $100, I mean, not a lot of people have this doll. Meanwhile, you might look at a doll like the Diwali Barbie. She's just about a mid-grade Barbie signature doll, but like soon as she came out, everybody wanted it. It was like sold out immediately, right? It just depends on the doll. You can't necessarily judge whether or not the doll is gonna be flying off shelves or if it's gonna end up just sitting there waiting to be chose on. And like these two Dia de Muertos dolls and the other ones from the series, a lot of these dolls came down in price, and I'm sure the people who bought them at $75 a pop are over here like, really? What? You gotta stop playing with me, Mattel. You know what I'm saying? You just never know. So keep that in mind as you're trying to like decide whether you want to purchase a doll as soon as you see that it's available, or maybe you want to wait a little bit before you decide. But you know, it's like a gambling thing with this, trying to figure out which dolls to do that with. I had that same issue with the Aaliyah doll before she was produced. As soon as I found out about her, I was just having all of these like questions in my head, like, is this gonna be one of those dolls? Or is everybody gonna be able to get a hold of this doll? Like, what's going on? So I came here and asked you guys what y'all thought, and many of you advised that I go ahead and purchase a Mattel Creations Club 59 membership for $10 a year. Just bypass all the stress so that I could order the doll when she was dropped for the members, and that's what I did, and here is my doll. So, you know, you kind of have to like play it by ear. To avoid this issue, just collect what you really truly love. Don't base it on how much money you think the doll is going to be worth later. If you're gonna buy dolls because you're trying to like resell them, really do a lot of research on which dolls you're doing that with, because they don't always hold the same amount of value that you might tell yourself just because it's vintage or whatever, you know? And pro tip, something my husband told me that I needed to stop doing, is not buying a doll when it's released, because I think if I wait long enough, the price is gonna come down. There's so many dolls I missed out on that way and regretted doing that with, because either they got sold out or the prices went up instead of coming down. So again, play that by ear. You gotta use your judgment, but just be careful not to do that with every single doll that drops, right? Mistake number 5, not being a part of the Pretty People crew over here and amongst the entire doll community at large. Many new collectors miss out on a lot of good information, good dolls, good sales, tips, rare finds, because they're just not a part of the online collector community. There's so many people that didn't even know the Aaliyah doll, for example, existed until it was already sold out, because they are not tuned in with the doll collecting community. Like this thing I'm talking about with the Dia de Muertos dolls, this is not a doll that I've ever actually actively actively had an interest in collecting until I saw that it was on sale. And that's because even though I think they're beautiful dolls and I love cultural representation, I couldn't afford $75 for each of these dolls and justify it, just because, for one, even though I love head sculpts, their faces are covered with makeup, so you can't really see the sculpts of each of the dolls, and they have stiff bodies, which is a factor for me in whether or not I'm going to spend a certain amount of money on a doll. So if I know I'm going to have to rebody the doll anyway, at $75, like, that's too much of a stretch for me to justify buying the doll. So I never really had an interest in buying these dolls just because of the price point and the things that the doll didn't come with that I'm usually looking for. Those restrictions basically protect my wallet. Then when one of those restrictions was removed, the price changed, then it was more of an option for me to add these dolls. So am I going to add more of these dolls to my collection? I don't know yet. Again, like I said, these were the cheapest of the Dia de Muertos dolls that I could find. And even though I do like the previous versions of these, some of them a lot better than these ones, I still can't justify spending that money on those dolls, even at the sale price, because I feel like it should be a little bit lower to justify for my personal taste. So for your budget, it might be worth it to spend $50 on one of these dolls if you've been pining over it and you just didn't want to spend $75 on it. Being a part of this community gives us more of a heads up and information that's going on with the doll world. A lot of things are just leaked into the community. It's not officially like announced by Mattel, so you might just miss it if you're not tuned in with us. So if you're wondering where you can plug yourself in, the doll community in general is a very welcoming community. You do not have to announce yourself. You do not have to be like, I'm new to this, I don't know what's going on. You don't have to do none of that, okay? You can lurk for a good 6 months before you even engage. I would say join a Facebook group, Instagram, all over Instagram. If you search the hashtag Dollstagram, then you can pretty much find us. Reddit, of course, right here on YouTube. These are great places to start in joining a doll community of your choosing, and you can even narrow it down to types of dolls if you really want to do that. And also, I advise watching reviews. Don't watch reviews so that you can fall into the hype of buying a doll. Watch reviews critically, okay? There's people like me who will tell you the absolute 100% honest truth about a doll, including their flaws. And I have to say this as a consumer myself, because I watch a lot of doll reviews. Be very choosy about how much of what a person is saying about a doll to ingest and take at face value, because sometimes we have collectors who are sponsored by Mattel or other doll companies. They do restrict what you're allowed to say about a doll when you have sponsorships, and how you can disclose negative aspects of the doll to your viewers. So if the person who is reviewing the doll got the dolls for free, like directly from a company, I mean, not like, my viewer sent me the doll or my dad gifted me the doll. I mean, a company sent them the dolls for free. Just be careful about not believing everything you hear on that particular video. Do more research, watch more videos of other people who have those dolls, and put together the information from multiple reviewers before you decide, and listen to what they're saying that's like a common negative trait of that doll, because you might hear about a flaw or an issue that was spotted by someone that maybe you wouldn't notice or other people just didn't notice. So these are things that will help you decide if you really want to add this doll to your collection or not. For example, the Tooth Fairy doll with the Carl sculpt, beautiful doll, lovely doll. Her retail price was $55. I don't know if she's available anywhere now for less than that. I haven't checked. When I got that doll, I was so disappointed with the quality of the hair. It was long, it was pretty, it was platinum blonde. Like, what? Like, bro, just the hair color alone was it for me. But I touched the hair, and the polypropylene texture of the hair was just such a miss. I can't stand hair textures that are difficult to work with, and I don't want to do the expert level hairdressing that would go into customizing that doll in order to justify keeping her at that price point. There was nothing else about the doll that made it worth the while for me to keep the doll. Not her clothes, not her articulation, just nothing about the doll other than her face, right? So as sad as I was to do so, I did end up returning that doll and just missed out on her because I could not justify keeping the doll at that price with this hair quality. And a lot of people who watched that video agreed with me that they didn't want to spend that kind of money on that doll just to be disappointed with the hair. These are the kinds of things that you will learn if you're a part of this community by listening to other people's views on a specific doll. And for you, polypropylene might not be a problem at all. And you might be like, well, I love this thing about her and that thing about her, and that is worth it. I can work with that. So if you're like a really good rerouter, or you don't mind certain hair textures, that doll might be something that you will really enjoy. So these are the kinds of things that you want to be aware of as you're watching reviews. Here are some bonus tips for you new collectors out there. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have a question about customizing, about where to find a doll, about the name of a doll, clothing, anything, really anything, the history of a doll, don't be afraid to ask. Ask the posters and content creators about whatever it is that you want to know about. They won't always answer you. Some of us are very bombarded by lots and lots of comments. It's difficult to manage all the comments or see all of the comments. Sometimes I'll be going through my comments. I'll see a comment from a month ago that for whatever reason I just missed. I never saw it. And I'm like, what? This is a good comment. Why didn't I see this? We don't always get notified by YouTube when we get comment. We might miss it. So don't be afraid to ask the same question multiple times on different posts. Don't be afraid to answer other people's questions if you see them posting questions. It's okay, especially here on this channel. This is a safe space for everybody who loves dolls that are adults to come and hang out and discuss their interests. So if you see people asking questions in the comments and you can answer it for them, don't wait for me. You're part of the community. This is your space too. Feel free to answer those people. If you don't ask, then it's like, how are you gonna learn? If you want to know about a face sculpt, if you want to know about what year a certain doll was released, if you want to know any of these things, don't feel like, oh, this is something that everybody already knows. I don't want to feel stupid asking what's a model muse's articulated body. Just ask the question. Somebody will answer it for you. Google it. Google knows almost everything about Barbie dolls. ChatGPT knows so much about Barbie dolls. It's shocking. So don't be afraid to ask. Next tip, be patient. You might have a list of grail dolls. Grail dolls are just dolls that are like your dream dolls that you wish you could get if money was not a problem, availability was not a problem, accessibility was not a problem. These are dolls that you would just like, this one, that one, that one, you would pick them to be in your collection. They may or may not be expensive, but for whatever reason, you know, it could be a doll that's like totally sold out, not available anywhere, and you just happen to miss that era of collecting, so you don't have it in your collection. Whatever those dolls are, they end up on a list that we call the Grail list. So each person's individual personalized Grail list is very different from others. It may take some time, it may take years, but sometimes some of the dolls that are on your Grail list will actually make it into your collection. For me, that's Amadeus back here with the black suit on. See this boy doll? He is my Jack Sparrow doll with the Johnny Depp face sculpt. I love me some Johnny Depp, okay? I would stalk Johnny Depp in real life, but I don't want to go to jail, so I have to do it with dolls instead. Yeah, I never get tired of looking at that pretty face, and he was just on my list for the longest. I would pine over him on pictures and other people's videos all the time. You know, I should make more videos of him because I'm sure other people are interested to see his details too. You know, this is not a doll that I ever really even imagined getting my hands on, because for me at that time, his price point was like ridiculously high. You know, it was like over $100 to get him. Eventually, I did end up adding him to my collection, and he's not the only one. I have a handful of Grail dolls that have made it into my collection. Drop it below if you want me to do a video on that, the Grail dolls that actually are a part of my collection now. So just hang in there, okay? You never know which dolls will find their way into your collection somehow. I've even had dolls that I found at thrift stores that were like on my wish list, and they just ended up at a thrift shop and I got it for $2 or $3. Keep an open mind. Another tip is to keep track of your collection. Do it while it's still early for you. If you wait like I did, years and years and years into your collecting, it can be very overwhelming depending on how much you've amassed. So while your collection is still kind of new, I would say find a way to categorize your collection somehow. Try using a spreadsheet on your computer, some type of archiving method on your phone perhaps, or even like an app. I think there's an app. I haven't tried them, but I think I'm gonna check them out. Maybe I'll do a review of it. But let me know in the comments if you've heard of these apps and if you've used them, how useful it is. The earlier you start with trying to archive your collection, the easier it's gonna be for you to manage your dolls over time. If you need to like sell a doll, you already know what doll it is, so it's easier to list. If something happens to you and your family ends up inheriting your doll stash, bro, like it's gonna be a nightmare for them to try to figure out the value of your dolls and what to do with them. So having something like this is gonna be useful in the long run. You know, it can only help, it's not gonna hinder. And it's a great excuse for you to handle your dolls, take pictures of them, and like appreciate each doll individually that's a part of your collection. Another bonus tip, it's okay to unbox your dolls. Yes, even your vintage dolls, it's okay. Please don't let the depreciation of value in your dolls stop you from enjoying your dolls any way you like. If you love to keep your dolls in boxes because you just like the aesthetic of how the dolls look in the box, that's a different story. But if you're refraining from taking a doll out of the box because you think somehow that's going to hinder the doll's value, please don't let other people shame you into keeping your dolls locked up in boxes. They're toys. They're meant for you to play with. They're meant for you to touch, meant for you to style and display whatever way you like. If you just want to take them out, keep them as is and put them on a doll stand on your shelf, that's fine. If you want to take them out of all of their original clothes, no matter how collectible the doll is, that's okay, because you know why? It's yours. It's your property. You can do whatever you want with them. They're not real people. It's just plastic. So you're not harming the doll by playing with your dolls. We're only here in this life cycle one time. So I don't know how old you are as you're watching this, but please don't let years and years and years go by and then you're like laying on your deathbed regretting holding these beautiful dolls in your hands and brushing their hair and styling them and posing them because you were afraid their monetary value would decrease over time. I promise you, by the time you think you're ready to sell those dolls, they're not going to be worth as much as you thought they would be just because you kept them in a box. And you'd be surprised how much people will still pay for a doll even without the box, even without original clothes, even without the original bodies, like in whatever condition, as long as it's not, you know, ran over by a Mack truck. But for the most part, like I said, I paid for my Gillian Anderson sculpt here, Agent Scully, almost the full price for her in-box retail, and she came with nothing. So don't look at it like you're losing out because you're doing that. Play with your dolls if that's going to make you feel content in your heart. And adding to that, restyling and customizing your dolls could make your doll feel a little bit more special. So don't be afraid to experiment and try different things out with your dolls. But speaking of customizing, this is another issue that I had in the beginning that I had to eventually let go of. Sometimes I would not buy a doll because it came with a stiff body or because I didn't like the outfit. These are things that you can change. It didn't dawn on me at the time. So I'm gonna say the same thing to you. If you're telling yourself, oh, I'm not buying that doll because she's got flat feet, you can rebody the doll. Learning to customize dolls is not that difficult when it's just basic things like that. So don't let that stop you from getting a doll, especially if it's a reasonable price. Sometimes I know when I get a doll, I'm gonna have to rebody this doll. So I factor that in when I'm deciding if I wanna add a doll to my collection or not. So I'm just gonna pass that one along to you. All right, so that's it for my tips for you guys. If you're watching this and you're thinking of a mistake that you made when you started collecting Barbie dolls, drop it in the comments because I would like to know. What is the best tip on this list that you've learned as a collector? I'll be bringing you guys more Barbie guides, reviews, and all kinds of dolly content in the future, so make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I'm Gypsy, you're not, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a dolly day.